always been really keen on has been actually sustainability in its widest sense. I was visiting professor for 5 years at the University of Pretoria, and a lot of the methods and approaches there got me really interested in it. And parallel to this is a huge impetus in medical education recently based on what they call social accountability. And I think there's a lot of overlap between the two actually in medicine. So basically what I was going to cover today is what is education for sustainability, why bother about it, what to educate about, how to educate, and the challenges at Edge Hill, or which I perceive, and the potential solutions. So what is it? The latest QAA document that has just come out, which is out for consultation, says that education for sustainability is the process of creating curriculum structures and subject relevant content to support sustainable development. That's pretty obvious. It's a sort of visioning thing which we'd all expect. So why bother about education? Well, we all know that education is the most powerful weapon that you can use to change the world. And I sincerely believe that education is an empowerment process to individuals to allow them to change themselves, but also the world around them. And that was from Nelson Mandela. So why do we need to bother about all this? Well, if we look at a recent map, which was this dashboard from 2019, looking at sustainable development across the world, there are very few countries of the world globally that actually have a high global index score, meaning that they are beginning to make transformations to achieve sustainable development goals. And if we look at the UK, we've still got a lot to do. And that dot in the centre is meant to be focused on Ormskirk, but probably is about 300 miles around it. But equally so, it's Ormskirk, our sphere of influence. So I think always we have to think of education as not just being the parochial Edge Hill view, but a national and a global view. We all live in this global interrelated society, as we know. And I think the COVID epidemic has really highlighted these issues. So what do we educate about? Well, I think the real challenge is to be looking at the 17 sustainability development goals. And people have discussed the importance that these are actually integrative and they're indivisible. So we can't just consider a focus on one of them, we need to consider all of them. Although there are priority ones, there are core goals which people talk about, which I think probably most people are now focusing on, which is responsible production and consumption, climate action, and life on land. But there are more fundamental catalytic goals, because if we're going to achieve that, local communities actually have to have good health and well-being, quality education, clean water and sanitation, and the development of partnerships. And somebody talked about this SDG pyramid, where you need to develop people so that they can thrive. You can then thrive and influence the local ecology and global ecology. And there's a much wider, almost sort of a self actualization, the sort of Maslow idea of actually being able to achieve this sort of widespread universal feeling of partnerships and peace and justice, and developing the strong institutions which will allow people to make changes ecologically, which will then be sustainable in itself. And I think that's a key aspect, is that whatever we do with sustainable development needs actually to be sustainable. So how can we educate? Well, I've put this down as the traditional curriculum as I see it. These are, we all know what curriculum statements look like, and there's one here which UNESCO produced in 2017, and as you can see, it goes to 68 pages. It's very, very good. It's got, as you would expect, a whole series of learning objectives which go through the 17 SDG goals. What are the objectives, how you could meet them, how you can assess them. And that is important, But it needs to be more than that, I think, because we need to particularly focus on other aspects. We need to recognize that we're already doing a lot. And I'm very keen that we take an appreciative approach where we look at our strengths. What are we doing already? Because any change project, it's much better to be building on strengths and using those strengths to build on areas which need to be further developed. And the QAA in 2014, and I think it's equally as relevant now, looks at, how does it relate to what I'm doing? How can we engage students? Beginning to audit it and looking at creating this learning environment. You don't necessarily need to read that. You can read that if you want. And there's a new one coming out anyhow. It's out for consultation at the moment. But for me, the real challenge is about having a creative curriculum. And the creative curriculum for me is not just learning about what sustainability is, but actually how you can actually make a change and put it into action. And the first one that I'm really keen on are co-design workshops, where you actually use design thinking, you work collaboratively with people, you identify what you consider to be a wicked problem, global, national, local, you develop creative ideas, and then you look at how you can put those creative ideas into innovation. And you can see I've written about the importance of design thinking in medical education, and I think it's a huge empowering process for individuals, but it's very much focused on making changes. And one of my colleagues, Natalie Lafferty from Dundee, has done a lot of work on global health challenges using co-designed interdisciplinary workshops to actually look at how you can make changes. I think the other area which is really important is actually developing these collaborative inquiry groups where people can regularly share an area of common concern, develop a shared view, a shared understanding, and then a shared action. And the research suggests that sustainable development associated with these collaborative inquiry groups, particularly through action research, can be highly effective. So what is the power of this particular creative curriculum? I think first of all, it's about the involvement of multiple stakeholders. People learn together, but also focus on action. And this can be local, national, international. And I see people moving between local and national, local, national and international. And with the days of the internet, we can begin to work and learn and share from each other. Earlier this morning, it's been webinar day for me. I've been running a webinar with colleagues in Iran on developing scholarship and teaching and learning. I do work with them. And, I can't get to Iran. It's difficult for them to come out of Iran. And, it's great to be able to do it online and hearing their perspectives, working with them. I learn a lot, they learn a lot. I think having a transdisciplinary approach is really, really important. If we're going to be looking at achieving the whole of these 17 sustainability development goals, we need to be working across disciplines. Now, we might have a focus on climate change, but if you're coming from a different perspective, like social justice, if you're coming from one which is about trying to improve people's lives and their capabilities, if we look at those working together, we're much more likely to get something which is worthwhile, something which will lead to action, and something which is sustainable. And I think an important aspect of this creative curriculum is what I would call a critical eco-literacy, which is about the understanding power and politics. Because one of the things which I found in South Africa is that they begin to understand the local power of advocacy to help to make change, and understanding that they may have the best ideas, but what's going to get in the way? Who holds the power? How can we make these changes? And it's understanding that these levels of power at different embedded levels. These are the big power, obviously the politics, of national governments and international governments, but also the micro politics within organizations. The creative curriculum, as I said earlier, is very much focused on looking at solutions. I used to do a lot of counseling in general practice and trained in it, but I was very much a solution focused person. So we can talk about things are difficult, things are awful, but actually let's rephrase it. Let's look at what could you do. Let's look at what would be the ideal future. How could we work towards working towards that future together? Because first of all, it makes the change, but it also energizes and empowers people to start thinking how they can actually make a change. And I think, as I said before, it's about building on existing strengths. And I think, every individual has that unique potential to contribute to this. They all have different perspectives, different backgrounds. And I think for me, that is what creates it. So, what are we doing already? What is our passion about? And how can we ignite that? And as you probably know, we're planning to run this open event, invited event workshop for looking at how we can embed it later in the year. And at that time, it's very much looking at an appreciative inquiry approach. And again, seeing it working in South Africa has really reinforced my view of the importance of appreciative inquiry, building on strengths. The other area which I have a great passion about is actually service learning. Now, I'm not quite sure how many people are fully aware of service learning, but essentially, you can either have service and learning, where learning is the predominant one. So what actually it is that people begin to learn by doing visits. It might be the opposite, where there is predominantly on service outcomes are important, but secondary goals of learning, and that is volunteering. So the primary focus on volunteering is actually providing the service, but less on actually learning. But going out to a community, the main focus is on learning, but not providing the service. And for me, service and learning together, this is service learning. And what we actually need is a reciprocal approach where learners grow and develop by working with some degree of service, and the service can then develop as something which is sustainable. Now, I'll come through this a little bit more in a minute. So Wikipedia, what better than getting a definition from them? And I think it's actually got a very good section on service learning. It's an educational approach that combines learning objectives with community service in order to provide a pragmatic, progressive learning experience while meeting societal needs. That, for me, is the vision of service learning. I've seen it in action in South Africa. It was the first time ever. It fits in very much with what many medical schools across the world are doing, and many universities. American universities are doing it, Australian, South Africa. We don't seem to be doing it so much in England. We do volunteering, but we don't tend to do service learning. And my vision always was that we would include this and develop it throughout the whole year in the second year of our undergraduate medical course. And that's what we are doing, working with local community organisations. And I think what's interesting is that it's a form of experiential education in which students engage in activities that address human and community needs, together with structured opportunities for reflection designed to achieve the learning outcomes. And I think this is important because what it does, it's about working with communities to address what they feel is their wicked problem. So how can you work and support that community to thrive? And what better way is to focus on one or more of the sustainability development goals. And the students learn by actually having this reflection. So they can share those reflections with the local communities, but also academically and with other groups of students. And for me, it's an incredibly powerful educational tool. So if we evaluate it, and okay, this is a particular report, this is the book I regard as being particularly helpful and people refer to because it's probably the largest scale study, but it's backed up by more recent studies. What do students get? Well, students develop interpersonal learning. They begin to reevaluate their own personal values. There's academic development. There's cognitive development. They develop critical thinking, problem solving skills. Ideally, these are opportunities for inter or transdisciplinary collaborative skills, and also important for advocacy skills. Students transform their experiences. They think about things in a new way. And for me, it very much resonates with Jack Mesro, who wrote about transformative learning and talks of these disorientating dilemmas. These are moments when suddenly you think, yeah, I never thought of that. And you can be quite creative. I ran work using digital storytelling with medical students when I was in Leeds. And it was an incredibly powerful tool because instead of just a simple reflection where they only have to think once when they write it up, in digital storytelling, they had to think and have critical moments, these disorientating dilemmas, by deciding what photographs did they take. They weren't allowed to have photograph patients. What photographs do they take? Which ones do they assemble for the digital story? They presented their digital story to a group. So what was the feedback? What was the discussion in the group? And then finally, writing it. So that, you know, students were going through 3, 4, 5 moments of these disorientating dilemmas and the associated reflections. So it was a very rich and deep learning experience. But also importantly, it's about helping students to become this global citizen and local citizen. And for me, I think it's absolutely crucial that our students do develop this citizenship and become basically part of a future democratic society. But then I would say that because I'm a great fan of John Dewey. So what are the challenges I see at Edge Hill? So what are we going to do? Are we going to focus only on key priority SDGs, or are we going to be holistic? Somebody only today said that I'm an associate editor for a journal, wanted to know about, you know, was I interested in having an article about sustainability related to medicine? And of course I said yes, but his view was that it's only climate change. And, you know, it's more than that. So who's going to be doing it? Are we going to have peaks? So maybe climate group, psychological aspects, or are we going to try and integrate across the various disciplines at this university? Are we going to try and break those silos and share our expertise and our skills? Is it going to be top down? Hopefully, it's going to be part of the strategic plan for the university. So there is at least going to be a vision that this is what it is. Are we going to have champions? Champions in each faculty, champions for each SDG, champions for key SDGs, champions for what? Champions for service development, champions for a creative curriculum. I think these are the things we need to be thinking about. And who's going to host it? Is it ISR? Is it beyond ISR rather? And when are we going to do it? And that's always, I think, the key aspects. We've got to stop procrastinating and talking about it. We actually got to get off our behinds and do it. And hopefully this meeting that we're going to be doing and running in February, March, is going to be that. It's about developing action plans and work streams to enable people to put it into action. So what are some of the potential solutions? I've turned here to social accountability of medical schools, because for me, this is exactly the same as what sustainability is. It's an obligation to direct their education, research and service activities towards addressing the priority health concerns of the community, region and/or nation they have a mandate to serve. And a huge movement of medical schools have done this. And medical schools are developing academic health centres which begin to unify education, research and service together based on local priorities. Not doing research which is out of this context, but to focus on the real needs of the local population. And by that, and from that, what people develop are actually transferable knowledge and information, which then can be, the traditional scientific journals. But actually, we need to really be clear about what do we mean by this mission and vision, so that, okay, it gets into a strategic plan, but where are we actually as ambitious as this? Medical schools in places like Canada, America and Australia and South Africa have this in their mission plan for their school. It's part of their mission, part of their vision and part of their strategic plan. And I think this is, quite, a formidable statement. Maybe this is what we need to have for sustainability. Think of social accountability as that. And again, social accountability has been going probably longer than education for sustainability, the documents, because it tends to go, it's gone back several years now. It actually goes back before 1995. It's been going really since there's a concept of medical schools and the notion of health, which goes back to the late 40s, where health is considered as a state of physical, psychological, social and spiritual well-being. And if we look at service learning, I think people have started to think, well, how can we develop this? But it's equally as applicable, I think, for looking at sustainability. What are we going to do? We've got to focus on all the aspects. It's got to be core mission of a university. It's got to be core mission of a faculty. It's got to involve students and it's got to involve the local community. And it's about a participatory approach. It's building on current strengths, such as the volunteering scheme that EHU already has. It's about planning it, developing prototypes. It's about having appropriate resources. It's about recognition that this is an academic endeavour. It's about evaluation and research. It's a huge opportunity to combine both together. But what it needs is a sustainable approach, because one of the areas that they found out, particularly in service learning, is that working with communities, you only begin to change communities if there is a commitment to work with that community over a period of time. And that one of the difficulties with volunteering is that at one extreme, it is voyeurism almost. Students provide a service and all that, that's incredibly valuable. Actually, it's just a glimpse. That's all it is of what is going on. But if we want to make embedded changes, it's actually about working with communities over many, many years, so that both organisations, the university and the local organisations, community organisations, are beginning to try solutions, learn from those implementation aspects, making further changes so that there is a sustainable reciprocal development for both. And my vision has always been that we need to have a sustainable approach that gives reciprocal benefits for both the community and for the students and the institution. So what are the final messages? Well, as I said, I'm a huge fan of John Dewey. And as he said, education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself. And, by that, Dewey was a great fan of of a democratic society. And interestingly, probably some of his philosophy grew up in the aftermath of the Civil War. And if you read about him and what influenced his life, early life, that was certainly a major influence, that he did not want to see that happen again. And he realized that there were no easy answers. So actually, education is absolutely fundamental. And as we all know, we have that responsibility. And I think the latest background paper from the UNESCO Futures of Education initiative is that learning has to become actually with the world. And it looked at what will education look like in 2050 and beyond, i.e. beyond the COVID. And, it talks about that human and planetary sustainability is one and the same thing. And this is why I'm so keen that we begin to integrate all the 17 sustainability development goals. It's important to be thinking about these, and UNESCO recommend this. This is what we need to be able to do. Because how do you develop climate change and communities to improve their community without developing individuals as well? So it's about having this joined up approach. And to coin a phrase, it isn't oven ready at the moment. We can only develop it ourselves. It's not there on a plate to serve and just warm up. There aren't the easy answers. And that is why using design thinking, service learning with reflection, working with communities over a longer period of time, using action and research methodologies is the only way forward, I feel. And that is the great challenge. It's okay talking about it and raising people's awareness on the curriculum, but we actually need to start doing something about it. And as UNESCO said, education needs to play a pivotal role in radically reconfiguring our collective place and agency within its interdependent world. We're developing, as we all know, citizens of the future. And the future depends literally in their hands. It depends on nobody else's. And our role as educators is to enable our students to be able to achieve their potential, to enable them to let the world achieve its own potential. And as UNESCO says, our future survival depends on our capacity to make this shift. So, thank you.